Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as usual by my co-host Mat Mlodzinski, here with another edition of CBB Rank, counting down the teams from 100 to 1 in intervals of 5 all the way until the start of the college basketball regular season, as voted for by our contributors on our site. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to get all these episodes we've done so far and all the ones we'll do in the future. We're going to catch up really fast to get to 1. Today we are doing 35 to 31. And let's start with 35. So we got Wake Forest, the Demon Deacons, who, it's an interesting kind of program here because they've been okay under Steve Forbes. They've had some real superstars. They had Alondas Williams. Most recently, they had Tyree Appleby. And I think one of the years, Steve Forbes actually won the ACC Coach of the Year. Alondas Williams won ACC Player of the Year without them even making the tournament. But never has Steve Forbes really had the returning talent that he has going into this year. And it starts with Hunter Salas, who's a former Gonzaga guard that just had an absurd breakout last season. 18 points per game, over 40% from three-point range. And really the way I see this, Matt, he is in that Alondas Williams, Tyree Appleby category of like the do-it-all superstar for Wake Forest, but he gets a second year, and that's where things maybe could go different.
Yeah, look, Hunter Salas is a star, and so is Cameron Hildreth. I mean, this Wake Forest team has arguably one of the top 1-2 punches in the ACC. I think between those two, the Demon Deacons have optimism to think that they could be one of the top teams in the ACC, right? And then obviously we have them at number 35 in CBB rank, so it goes without being said, right? But I mean, I think this team is right up there with North Carolina and Duke, honestly, if it all comes together. I mean, 1 through 5, they've got good players at every position. The only question mark is Omaha Billieu, who, again, looking at what he did at Iowa State, he was a big-time recruit. Iowa State was a great team last year. You get to Wake Forest, maybe that reset helps you out a little bit. You got Parker Fredrickson off the bench. I mean, this is a guy that shot at about 37% from deep, can certainly score the ball if Wake Forest needs to, and he's the second guy coming off the bench. So it's a deep team. There's stars on this team. There's reason for Wake Forest to think this could be one of their best seasons in recent history in this program.
Yeah, in a long time. I think I would kind of hold off a little bit on the Duke, North Carolina comparisons, only because Steve Forbes, I feel like, well, I do like him as a coach. I don't think he's necessarily like proven he could totally maximize his talent yet. So that's why I think number 3, though, in the ACC is very up for grabs. That could be Wake Forest. I really do like Cam Hildreth. I like Efton Reed as well, like a huge upside guy, very active on the glass. Of course, Billieu is a project guy, but leading the point, you got Tyler Johnson from Louisville, who had a real solid season in his freshman year. I think that is the guy you want to replace Boopie Miller, because he's basically what Boopie Miller gave you. Maybe a little bit of like Boopie Miller light, but like extremely quick, great handles, like a speed demon type guy. I will say, Matt, I think Andrew Carr, who's off to Kentucky, is a bigger loss than people realize. I think Billieu, like even at his maximum potential, will not provide that same shooting from the 4 spot, but like all this returning talent, I think this is the most returning talent that Wake has had under Forbes. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism for sure.
And Efton Reed too. I mean, look, I'm not saying I should take it back a little bit. North Carolina is in their own category as a team that can win the national championship, but I wouldn't be surprised if Wake Forest in the ACC does really well, right? I mean, you can finish high in an ACC against your common competition and not necessarily be a contender to win the national championship, right? I mean, speaking from experience, look at Seton Hall last year, right? Finished 4th in the Big East, did really well against Big East teams. No one would have thought they would be a national championship team, right? They didn't even make the tournament. So I think that's where I see Wake Forest, right? I think they can have a really good record in the ACC. Not saying they're a Final Four team by any means, but don't be surprised if this team does play really well this year.
Yeah, I could see that. Also, in recent history, the ACC, and this could very well be the case again, like they haven't been a great regular season team, a great metrics conference, but they've done well in the NCAA tournament. So we'll say if Wake makes it, they kind of have that makeup. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch the Deacons this year following the ACC. Number 34, we've got Illinois. Illinois finally, though, waking up as a sleeping giant last year. I feel like not only did they have a great regular season, but they made it to the Elite Eight for the first time in like how many years? Like 20 years or something. I think they hadn't made the Elite Eight since they won the national title. I think I read that in that article. So the roster is completely different, but still very good. And you got Brad Underwood as your coach. The talent on this roster, I really can't. You're not into it as much as I am. I mean, you got 8 guys that were in the top 55 of their respective high school classes. I know I pointed out that not all of them are 1-2 years removed from high school. So, if you were a top high school recruit 4 years ago and you haven't produced in those 4 years, maybe the recruiting rankings were just wrong on you. But you seem to be a little different on your opinion on Illinois than me. So I'll let you talk.
Look, I mean, they got some good recruits, and Illinois brought in a really good recruiting class, right? And they've got a lot of guys. They seem like they can be deep. I've heard a lot of good things about Ben Humrichus, but and again, Kylan Boswell is not a bad point guard to have, right? I mean, coming over from Arizona, brings winning basketball, brings experience to this team. I think Illinois is definitely a top 50 team in CBB rank, right? I'm just concerned when you lose Terrence Shannon, when you lose Marcus Domatsk, when you lose Coleman Hawkins, even Quincy Garia and Dane Danger to an extent. I mean, this team lost a lot of, again, the key players that brought you there. So just because you bring in this talent doesn't mean it's going to work all over again. And I don't think any of these guys are Terrence Shannon Jr., right? None of these guys are that skill level. So that's where my concern is with Illinois. Who's going to be the go-to guy on this team? Who's going to lead this team in scoring? That's what the question I have.
Okay. Well, I think that's why they're 34 and not in the top 25. That's kind of my counter argument for what you're saying. Because I do see your point. But then again, like, are we overhyping them at 34? 34 is saying, they have some upside, but they're not a top 25 team at the moment. That's what I'm thinking. And the upside is there with Will Riley, number 20 overall recruit in this class, the highest rated recruit for Illinois ever. He's our projected 6th man. They got another guy who's a freshman, Kasparis Jakushionis, who's a top 40 recruit. They got Johnson, a top 35 recruit, and Ivasic, the other Ivasic, top 50 recruit, could be contributors. Like, I think also Kylan Boswell is a huge add. That's your team MVP right there, no question about it. I think really one of those breakout candidates in college basketball, top of the list for me, because if you remember the games he had early on against Duke and Alabama and just how much he cooked in non-conference play, obviously cooled off significantly, but there's just so much talent there, and he'll obviously be a fan favorite just because he's the hometown kid. I do agree on the front court. There's a lot to be desired, lot that, I think you could have more there. But that's kind of what makes Will Riley much more important. I think we in our articles we always have our team MVP and our make or break player, and I think that's like a perfect encapsulation of Illinois. You got Kylan Boswell, team MVP, make or break is Will Riley.
Yeah, I mean they're all going to be crucial for this Illinois team. I agree. Front court has some issues. I think there's solid talent on this team. Will Riley's going to need to play well from the start, right? I mean, I don't think he's going to be able to just hang around for half the season and quickly, slowly get used to Big Ten basketball. I think he's going to need to be crucial from the start for Illinois, especially when you got non-conference games against Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, and Duke, right? I mean, it's definitely, you got three of those 4, and who knows if Missouri is going to be different this year. Illinois got some tough games this season. Trey White, another guy too, real quick. I mean, he's a good pickup from Louisville. I think that's a guy that could also strengthen this bench. Again, solid team, just not very high on Illinois.
All right, number 33, we got Mississippi State, and Chris Jans has built kind of a solid program. They haven't won that tournament game yet, so a little bit different than Illinois. But of course, it's kind of hard to win tournament games when you can't shoot the ball to save your life, and that's really been the case with Mississippi State the last couple of years. They've had a lot of continuity, but the continuity was guys that couldn't shoot. And Now it's a whole pretty much new roster, a lot of turnover. Of course, you do return a pretty good supporting cast that starts with Josh Hubbard, who averaged 17.1 points per game, but also nearly 20 points per game in games they started. Just, I think, one of the most underappreciated offensive players in the country. They have an experienced front court. They got Cameron Matthews and Keyshawn Murphy are both back. But really, Matt, it's the portal that I want to emphasize. What could make Mississippi State different, not necessarily like significantly better, but just different this year. They got Kanye Clary from Penn State. It was a really good scoring point guard. He was let go of that Penn State team in February. So, maybe change of scenery could help there. Of course, on the flip side, you got Hubbard and Clary, both under 6 feet, both probably going to start. So that'll be interesting. But then Riley Kugel from Florida also coming in, was regarded as a potential NBA guy, another guy like underperformed a little bit. Change of scenery could help. And then you got Claudell Harris off the bench, great shooter. RJ Melendez from Georgia off the bench. I think maybe this Mississippi State team doesn't improve significantly in the regular season. I think they're more designed to finally win a tournament game. They're definitely different than past Mississippi State teams. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, I saw them in that tournament game against Michigan State. I was down in Charlotte last year, and that was rough to watch. Yeah. Look, but Kanye Clary, like you mentioned, Claudell Harris, I mean, getting guys that can shoot the three, that can open up the floor more for this Mississippi State team. It's not just going to be Josh Hubbard this year. You got Riley Kugel as well. You got some players. You got some high-level talent coming in. And honestly, Tolu Smith is the only major loss for this team. I mean, you look at DJ Jeffries and Jimmy Bell, certainly pretty good rebounders, so they're going to have to replace that. But scoring-wise, Tolu Smith is the only scorer, right, that this team lost. And they replaced, what they lost with a lot more scores. So front court, not going to be nearly as good as it was last year, but scoring is going to be a lot better. So a different Mississippi State team, and I'd say better.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it'll be a lot more offensive playmaking, and I think they'll decline a little bit on the defensive end, but the drastic improvement on offense will be the main storyline there. Number 32, Memphis. It's the same storyline every year, right? With Penny Hardaway. Sure. They got top-tier talent. Can they keep things under control? Last year, that was not the case. They lost 7 games in conference. This year is another opportunity. And, Matt, they have an absolutely loaded starting lineup. I do think the bench has a significant fall-off. I think they only have really 9 guys there anyway. But, man, tell me about the starting lineup because that's loaded 1 to 5.
I mean, look, Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty, right? I mean, you look at what Tyrese Hunter did at Texas. Haggerty, one of the top transfers in the entire country. And you know that Memphis is going to get one of those guys, right? I mean, they always do when you got Penny Hardaway there. Colby Rogers from Wichita State. Dane Danger, I mentioned him from Illinois earlier in the episode. Ed Musa Cisse from Ole Miss. 1 through 5, Memphis is going to be fine, right? And then Tyreek Smith off the bench. Will he play? Will he not play? We could probably have an whole episode on that, right? Because it just seems like I don't know what's going on with Tyreek Smith. But, overall, 1 through 5, and depending on what the Tyreek Smith situation and what happens with that, it's a very talented Memphis team. The key for me, Dan, you got the article open right now?
No.
Okay, I'll read it off then. The non-conference slate. Ready for this?
I'm ready.
Missouri, at UNLV, at San Francisco, versus UConn in the Maui Invitational. Then they'll play either Colorado or Michigan State, and then they'll have a third Maui Invitational game. Followed in a couple weeks at Clemson, at Virginia, versus Mississippi State, and versus Ole Miss. There are no breaks in this non-conference for Memphis.
Yeah. I don't think that's like absolutely, top team after top team. There's just you can't really afford to take a day off. There's a large quantity, and then there's also obviously there's UConn. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's not like you're playing 5 top 10 teams, but almost every game in the non-conference is one that is worthwhile watching, right? It's either an NCAA tournament team or an NIT tournament team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if they don't win the AAC this year, like that's unacceptable, right?
Sure.
Right. Like I don't know. I don't know what really how to look at this program with Hardaway and Memphis. Because like I said, it's the same storyline every year. I will say I really like kind of how the starting lineup also balances off of itself. Like, I think there's kind of a little bit of everything. You got your scoring and your Tyrese Hunter and PJ Haggerty. You got your shooting and Colby Rogers. You got your traditional big man and Dane Danger, more of an offensive guy. You got your rim protector and Musa Cisse. Like, you got everything. Depth is what's going to hold them back, and then just, of course, it's Penny Hardaway Memphis team. So you can't just evaluate based on talent.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, right? I mean, you look at the talent. You can always talk about the talent at Memphis, but until Penny Hardaway puts it together, wins some tournament games, it almost doesn't mean anything us talking about their talent, because we know that it's all going to come down to what they do in the tournament.
Number 31, the Oregon Ducks. Welcome to the Big
Woo!
Ten, Oregon. Matt, I think there's some real offensive firepower here. Jackson Shelstad will, I think, get all the controls to this team. He had a great freshman year, and he showed off some insane range, made some like really deep shots, and I think he's just going to go absolutely off this year. Another guy I really like, TJ Bamba from Villanova. I think coming to Oregon, he'll be a lot more productive of a player. He's a nice, like, physical wing, but I really noticed back at Washington State, his first stop, he was really maximized as a player because they were able to space. So not only were they able to utilize him downhill, but utilize him as a shooter. So I think that'll kind of return a little bit at Oregon. It's a better stop, better scenery for him. They got Nate Biddle. He's a nice piece at the rim. A really nice bench, too. Raheem Moss from Toledo, Supreme Cook from Georgetown. You got your eighth guy, Keyshawn Bartholomew, who averaged 8 points per game last year. Good shooter, like returns. He was an Oregon Duck last year. I do have a few reasons for hesitation, which I'll talk about, but Oregon is legitimately 31st. I don't have a problem with that, and I don't think they're being talked about enough. I feel like they're kind of sliding under the radar a little bit.
I'm a huge fan of Oregon. I mean, I wrote this article. I've been a huge fan of, usually Oregon brings in really talented rosters, and I've picked them as a sleeper team before. I don't want to sound like a broken record with this because it's the same thing all over again, right? Dana Altman always brings in talent, but there's so much about this team that you like, right? 8 of the 11 rotation players, Dan, are 6'5" or taller, right?
Interesting.
I mean, or 6'4" or taller, excuse me, with Raheem Moss as the smallest. I mean, that's pretty good length, pretty good height. This team has, a good variety of a couple of big men, but also just guys that are like bigger wings, right? And I think that can help out. And then you talk about the scoring, right? I mean, everyone in their starting 5 averaged at least 7.5 points at the power conference level, or 7.5 or more at the power conference level last season. Off the bench, they've got 3 more guys that fit that category, plus Moss, who averaged 15.5 at Toledo. So he should be fine as well, right? I mean, there's so many scoring pieces on this team. To me, Jackson Shelstad could be a first or second team All-American when it's all said and done this season. I think he's that good. And I think that Oregon, going into their first year in the Big Ten, is a team we have to look out for with serious Final Four chances.
I think the reason I like the tournament's such a crapshoot, sure. Sure. I think the reasons they're not maybe a top 25 team, defense, I don't think this is an elite group of defensive players.
Sure.
Could we say maybe Dana Altman has lost a little bit of the touch he used to have in those 2010s? I
100%.
feel like, yeah, so maybe that. And one more thing, N'Faly Dante, no longer there. He was injured a little bit last year, and when he was on the court, he made a huge impact. Like, the on-off comparisons are drastic. Yeah, Oregon, 31st. That's fair. And really, we talk about our CB rank compared to the AP poll. Our top 25's got to be pretty similar, right? Because we haven't really, as far as I realized, we haven't really gotten to top 25 AP poll teams, and we're at 31. So, yeah.
Yeah, we seem to be on par, on pace. And again, we did this
a while ago.
Months ago. Yeah, I mean, we put this list together months ago. So,
something to be said about that. I don't know. I don't know whether to really attribute that to us being ball knowers, or we're just we think like the AP poll voters, which is maybe not always the greatest thing, but
sure.
Yeah. that will do it for today's edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our channel here at CBB Review. We will have more content. Of course, we're counting down all the way to 1, and then we have content, pick'em style episodes, weekend recaps throughout the regular season. So be sure to tune into those as well. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.